Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Peterson, and the scripture this morning is from Matthew 25, verses 31 through 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." God bless the reading of his word.
Our first trip was in celebration of our 10-year wedding anniversary. We thought we wanted to do something meaningful and just a little bit more powerful than just going on a trip to the beach or something. We wanted to do something where we were actually trying to make a difference in the world. And that was our first thought. We're going to go and make a difference in the world. But it was really, God showed us very quickly that he was guiding us to make a difference in our own selves, in our own life. After going down a few times for 1 week each, I've mentioned to Bill that I don't think a week is enough time. We need to go down for a longer period of time. So we made a decision to go down as a family and stay in Guatemala for about a month to experience a little bit more of the culture.
So we decided to go down to Guatemala as a family in 2013. And so our boys were, about 9 and 7 years old. We got to spend time with the local elementary school, really getting to know the kids there and the culture, and being able to introduce that to our sons was definitely a blessing.
The project that we took on when we took this on as a family trip is I really wanted to introduce a lot more books and children's books into the school in Guatemala. It was something that I had seen that they were lacking. So we brought probably 200 books, and we worked for a week with the school there to build bookshelves for each of the classrooms. And then at the end of the week, we gave the teachers these huge stacks of children's books for their classrooms. And that was a pretty powerful moment. The teachers were excited, the kids were really excited, and the kids that had helped us build the bookcases were really excited that they were able to contribute to that as well. And it was just a lot of fun, really neat.
And definitely when you go down there, it's impossible not to see God, whether it's through the beautiful country and the mountains and the lakes, whether it's through the people that you're serving, the locals, or whether it's with teams, if you're going down there with a team and seeing God through them. So it's definitely a place that when we go, we feel kind of rejuvenated, recharged, and as soon as we come back, we're looking forward to our next trip.
And I think a couple of times the part that touched my faith the most was when someone who was there, whether it was a construction worker that we worked with or a child that we were engaged with, asked us, why are you here? Why did you come here? And it was very nice to be able to say, well, God led me here, and I come here because I love you guys, and it's so much fun to spend time here. And this is where God wanted me to be.
So each week in this Chosen series that we're starting today, for the next few weeks, you're going to hear stories from members of our church who've been to Guatemala. It's such a special connection our church has had, and we have the opportunity, you'll hear about in coming weeks, of ways that we can expand this partnership, this connection. I love seeing the pictures because the first mission trip I took here at the church was going with the youth and my daughter to Guatemala. And so as I went yesterday to different graduation parties, a lot of my connection to those seniors who are graduating was they were part of that trip. And so it's just been an amazing experience. And what I love about Bill and Maria's story is it reminds me so much of Jamelin and I and our decision to go and live in Haiti for 2 years. We made that decision not on our 10-year anniversary, but when we'd only been married 7 months, and we decided to move down to Haiti and live there for 2 years. And the first month in particular was incredibly hard. I mean, it was so difficult because maybe Bill and Maria knew Spanish. When we moved down to Haiti, Jamelin and I knew no Creole whatsoever. Our language skills were so poor. And so we felt completely and utterly helpless. And when you feel helpless, then you begin to wonder about your purpose. Like we were wondering, what are we doing here? What were we thinking, right? And so for us, another reason I connect to Bill and Maria's story is the turning point began for us the second month we were there when the school opened, because that gave us a concrete place to connect and serve. I was going to be the English teacher for the junior high and high school, and then Jamelin was going to manage the sponsorship program. And so it was like we finally had a direct, focus for our time there. And on top of that, when the school opened, the week before the school opened, there was so much work to be done at the school that was all hands-on stuff, like cleaning, organizing, painting, stuff like that. And it was stuff that required no language skills whatsoever. So we were down with that. And I remember one particular day, our job was to paint chairs. And the chairs were kind of like that wooden one you see there, except they had a wicker seat instead of a flat wooden seat. And when I say some chairs, I don't think that does it justice. We were supposed to paint this big mountain of chairs. There were hundreds of chairs that the school had bought for the beginning of the school year. And the purpose of the painting, I didn't understand it then, wasn't to make the chairs look beautiful. The point of painting was to protect the wood, kind of like a stain. And so to that end, they gave us, some brown oil-based paint, but they wanted to stretch the paint further, and so they cut it 50-50 or so with gasoline. So you can imagine the fumes, take oil-based paint and then take the fumes way higher than that, right? And it made it super runny. It was like painting with water. And it was so hard painting chairs, if you ever painted chairs before, it's hard to start with because there's drips and runs and so forth, but we're using this stuff that feels like water. And it was so hard, but we were there painting, I was taking my time. The perfectionist in me wanted each chair to be, as great as it could be. And I'd set it, finish a chair, and Jamelin was with me, and we'd set it off neatly to the side. And then meanwhile, another young man, a Haitian, came and joined us at about a half hour, maybe an hour into it, right? And you couldn't talk to him much because our language skills were still pretty poor. We could ask him his name, tell him ours, and then we were done, right? And so I didn't know if he was doing this because he was paid, like a staff, or if he was a volunteer. I didn't know any of that. Only thing I knew about him was that he was a terrible painter. He was just slapping it on as fast as he could. Paint was going everywhere. He didn't worry about drips or runs or even complete coverage. He was going twice the pace we were, and he would just, kind of throw the chairs off to the side. And so I made clear, I tried to do it quietly and subtly, but I made sure that our chairs stayed separate from his chairs, right? Because I didn't want, if someone came along and looked at the chairs and saw how poorly they were being painted, I didn't want someone pointing the finger at the blanc, at the Americans, the foreigners that we don't know how to paint. So I was kind of keeping mine separate, and so we painted side by side with two separate piles that were growing, and that went on for hours. And you can imagine after a couple of hours, eventually these two piles started to meld together, right? And the thing is even though individually I could tell a difference between, one of our chairs and one of his chairs, once they started to meld in a big pile, and in the aggregate, you really couldn't tell the difference. A brown chair was a brown chair, right? And part of it too was the hot August Haitian sun was pounding down on us. Our shade had disappeared, and the fumes were giving us such a headache. And we still had, we were only halfway through. We had a huge pile left to go. And I thought to myself, what am I doing here? Taking such care with each one of these little chairs, and I could just be slapping it on like this guy is and throwing it. No one would even know the difference. No one would even see. Let me pause right there, because that's the crux of today's story. The question of who really sees. If you ever start to feel like, what I do, no one sees, no one really cares, it doesn't matter, you need to go back and read Matthew 25. This is the last of Jesus' stories in the whole book of Matthew. This is the final story he tells. It's the summation of his entire ethic that he's been passing on to the disciples. And it all hinges on the idea that there is someone who sees what we do and who judges and repays and rewards accordingly. Now, scholars will point out that this is not a parable. And for a long time that confused me, but let me explain it to you. Parables start with everyday objects: grain of wheat, workers in a vineyard, a father and two sons, like everyday objects or people. And then it moves to things of eternal significance. This story actually moves in the opposite direction. It starts with the eternal significance, like this scene of eternal glory and the judgment of all the nations. But then what does it do? It points us back to the everyday and reminds us that the everyday things we do have eternal significance. So William Barclay, in his handy little commentary, he makes kind of three quick observations about this. And the first observation that sounds, like you don't even have to say it, but the first observation he makes is that the things that Jesus points out, giving someone food or water or clothing, that these are simple, everyday acts that are available to any single person. They're things that anybody could do. They don't require advanced degrees or special knowledge. They don't require even a lot of resources. All that is required is for you to see someone who is in need and respond in compassion to them. That's it. It's available to everyone. Mother Teresa is often quoted as saying, "Not all of us can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love." The opportunity to practice kindness is available to every single person. And Jesus says, in the end, this is what matters most. It's not about how much knowledge you have. It's not about how much success you achieve. It's not about the money and possessions you accumulate or the admiration of your peers. What matters most to God is the help we provide to others. You've probably heard that motto, kindness matters. Jesus would agree with that, except he'd probably add the singular adverb, kindness matters most. Kindness matters most. The second observation William Barclay makes, he says, it's not just that any kind of kindness matters. He says, but the examples that are given in the story, they're uncalculating kindness. Kindness which is given without any need to be recognized or any expectation of reward. That's the kind of kindness the king is looking for. There's two different groups in the story. There's the sheep and the goats. And both groups, are very similar. They both ask the same question, Lord, when did we see you? The goats in particular, when Jesus confronts them with all the things they didn't do, that they didn't give food, they didn't give water, they didn't give clothing, and so on and so forth, the people respond, well, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and not help you? As in, if we had seen you and not someone else in those conditions, we would have helped you. They would have practiced kindness as long as it could be seen and rewarded accordingly. And the first group in particular, they ask the exact same question. When Jesus says, thank you for doing all these things, they ask the same question. Lord, when did we see you? Which points to the idea that the difference between the groups wasn't whether or not they saw Christ. The difference between the two groups was whether or not they needed to be seen practicing kindness to others. And so that gets to a third observation then. And the third observation is this, is that as we give to the least of these, any kindness we offer to them, it's like we're offering that kindness to the King himself. And this is the twist of Jesus' stories. Every single one of Jesus' stories and parables, it always has a twist that's unexpected. And this is the unexpected part. Because kings in Jesus' day and in today, kings live in palaces, right? They have big, spacious homes. They have servants who bring them food when they're hungry or bring them something to drink when they're thirsty. They don't lack for clothing. They wherever they go, they're received as guests of honor. They are treated with the highest level of care possible. If you want to please a king or boss or whatever the modern day equivalent is, you go to their palace. And you make a gift to them, and you make sure you're seen giving that gift. That's the way the world works. But that's not the way the kingdom of God works. In the kingdom of God, the king locates himself among the least of these, among those who lack adequate food, water, shelter, clothing, among those who have no ability to repay. And on their behalf, Jesus says, as you have done it for the least of these, you've done it for me. So the question I want us to kind of reflect on today is that singular question of, Lord, when did we see you? Hungry or thirsty or in prison or sick? When did we see you? Because the reality is that it's sometimes hard for us to see the needs of others. I mean, as Americans, particularly living in as nice a place as Zionsville is, it's very easy for us to kind of go through our days and not see the needs of those around the world. I mean, what do we know about hunger? What it's like to go through a day and not have enough to eat? What do we know about, can we even imagine what it's like to not have access to clean water or to be forced to leave our homes because of violence? I mean, it's just so easy for us to kind of get caught up in the day-to-day business of doing life here and not see the needs of those around the world. And Jesus in this parable challenges us not just to see them and to see their needs, but to see them as our family, as brothers and sisters. That's what Jesus calls them, the least of these, my brothers and sisters. And he challenges us to treat them the way we would treat him. So how do we do that? Well, this week, as you've heard throughout the service so far, we have a challenge, the Matthew 25 challenge, and we're doing this in conjunction with World Vision. And the reason I'm excited about this the Matthew 25 challenge, it's a 1-week challenge, but I think it has the potential to open our eyes to the least of these and to shape our heart and to deepen our compassion for the poor and the least of these, just as God desires. So in a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through what this challenge looks like. But first, to introduce it, I want to share with you this video.
Then the king would say to those on his right, "Come, you are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invited you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me."
The Matthew 25 challenge was a transformational moment for my family and I. There was one particular day when the challenge was to sleep on the floor. And I walked by my daughter's room, and she was already there on her sleeping bag, reading her Bible.
The Matthew 25 challenge was an incredibly spiritual experience for me personally. God was teaching us different things every day, and sharing it with each other was really exciting.
Well, when it came to the Water Day Challenge, 3 words come to mind: caffeine, withdrawal, headaches. Going without coffee all day was a lot harder than I thought. I would get these headaches, but every time I did, it would remind me of the 6-kilometer walk that women and children have to do to get unclean water.
My first thought was, this will be easy. I grew up missing meals and sleeping on the floor, but my daughters, not so much. They were challenged to come out of their Wi-Fi life and actually experience what kids around the world experience every single day.
So if you didn't get it from the video, here's what the Matthew 25 challenge is about. It's a challenge to take little steps every day outside your comfort zone to begin to understand perhaps a little more deeply what people around the world live with. And the way it works is you text in a certain code. I'll share that with you in just a moment. And when you do, you opt in. Each day you'll receive 3 things. The first thing you receive is a small challenge, and the challenge might be to skip lunch, eat rice and beans, to go drinking only water, to sleep on the floor, something like that. You'll also receive a video story to share with you the story of a child who's living in extreme poverty in some part of the world. And then lastly, you'll receive a short devotion and a prayer to help deepen our heart for the poor. That's what happens every day. And here's my hope, is that we can do this as a church together. Like, I hope every single one of us who's here today will sign up to do so. Everyone at home who's joining us online, our entire VBS children's program is built around this. You can do it together. Do it with your family. Do it with your small group. Invite family members who aren't members of our church, perhaps, who live in other parts of the country. Say, hey, we're doing the Matthew 25 challenge. We want you to join in with us. And I know some of you may say, well, I can't do some of those challenges, Dave. For health reasons, I can't skip a meal, or for health reasons, I can't sleep on the floor. I'm probably not going to get up if I get down on the floor. And that's okay. You don't have to do every single thing. Don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you can, from being part of this challenge, even if it's just watching the videos and spending time reading and praying every day, reflecting on the least of these and how God calls us to be in ministry together. Just do that. So here's what I want you to do. I want you right now to pull out your phones, which I never say in a sermon, and just don't open Facebook, or unless you're on Facebook Live, but otherwise don't open all the other apps. Just open your messages. And when you open your messages, compose a new message, and where he says 2, enter the numbers 56170. I'm doing it right now, live with you. Okay? And then down, I'm doing it with you, and I have problems. So then 56170, and then where you have to type in your message, type in the letters ZUMCM25. And when you do that, you'll be given the opportunity to opt in. They'll ask for 2 things. First, they'll ask for the date. And so you'll choose option A because we are starting right now. So you'll say, option A, I want to start right now. And then secondly, they'll ask for your zip code. And that's because we have people joining from all over the country. We want to make sure that they send us the messages, at the appropriate time, not in the middle of the night or anything like that wake you up. And then lastly, it'll prompt you to share your email, because there's a family activity guide. If you want to receive that, you can share your email and you'll get that family activity guide that has activities and questions to take you a little bit deeper. So I hope you do that. Finish, and once you finish texting, emailing, whatever, put your phone down. And then I want to share with you one more thing. And this is something that's been on my heart for a few weeks. I wanted to share it a few weeks ago when I preached Pentecost Sunday, but it was still too fresh and I wasn't sure how to craft it into a message, but I've had 2 weeks to kind of reflect on it since then. On that particular day, I preached on Acts chapter 2 and the prophecy that Peter quotes from Joel. In those days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Now let me tell you a couple of experiences I had the weekend before I preached that message. On Friday, I served with our church at the Faith Build Habitat site. There are actually 2 sites side by side, 2 Habitat homes that are being built up in Lebanon. And there was a team from our church along with volunteers from Colony Woods, the neighborhood just down the street. And so we were working together, and the work we were doing was kind of small. Like people were painting trim and putting up soffits. I was part of a team that was framing in a garage. And when I say I was part of the team, that I was the guy that held the ladders for people and passed tools, and went and got water if people were thirsty. That was kind of my role that morning. That was kind of what we were doing. But we didn't get a chance to meet the family that's receiving that home, the Faith Build home. But I know a little bit of their story. And their story is that they are refugees. They lived in Syria, in Aleppo. And when war advanced and bombing began, they had to flee their home in the middle of the night to go to a refugee camp. And then for 5 years now, they've bounced around from country to country and refugee camp to refugee camp until they finally landed safely here in Indiana and Boone County. And even though what we were doing was mundane and everyday, just at the end of the day, you could just barely see some of the progress we made. It was all connected into this mission that we were helping to provide a home to a family that was displaced. And I thought of Matthew 25, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And then the next day, Saturday morning, I got up and I went to the men's service day down at Barnes United Methodist Church. And we went down to Barnes, 9 o'clock in the morning, and our jobs that day were we were painting a kitchen that they used to prepare meals for the community, and then also a group of us were putting up shelves for the food pantry. And so at one point, I kind of broke away from the teams that were working to kind of just walk around and take pictures and talk to everyone, and as I did so, Pastor Lydia Davis, who you see in the picture there, Lydia kind of pulled me aside and said, well, let me give you a tour of the food pantry. And so I went into the food pantry, and it was just beautiful. She'd done such an amazing job stacking and organizing all the shelves with all the donations. I want you to know the donations we give, that you give to Barnes United Methodist Church, she takes such good care of them. And in the middle of the food pantry, there's this stack of boxes. And I thought there was new donations. So I was a new shipment of stuff. And she goes, no, those are boxes that we've prepared to give to our clients, who come to the food pantry. I said, you mind if I look? And she said, no. So I opened one of the boxes up. And the amount of stuff that was in this box, I was just blown away by how abundantly she shares what she receives with those who are. And I said, wow, there's so much in there. He goes, well, that's just half of it, Dave. There's a whole other room with refrigerated and frozen goods, and we fill that too. I said, wow, you were hungry. I was hungry, and you fed me. And then she kind of brought me over. She said, I want to show you this. And she had a box, a milk crate actually, with manila folders kind of crammed in from beginning to end. And she said, the food ministry, Dave, is really, it's just our platform to build a relationship with people. The point of this ministry is not a handout. The point of this ministry is to build a relationship with people. And so she just reached in and pulled one at random. And she opened it up and she showed me how the information they collect about families, the relationship they build, and then how they share the story of Christ with them. And she was just kind of walking me through and showing me, and then it got to the point at the bottom. And I truly believe she picked this one at random, and yet at the bottom there was a check And this particular person said, I want to invite Christ into my life. And then she flipped the page and showed the note that on this particular day, this person and their entire household was baptized. And I thought, wow, how amazing we get to be part of this ministry. And then I left Barnes United Methodist Church, and instead of coming back up to Zionsville, I went to join a banquet that was taking place in downtown Indy. This banquet was for domestic abuse survivors. The last year when we received money for COVID, we at the end of the year, we still had money left over for COVID relief, and we didn't want to hold on to that money. We wanted to kind of get it out in the community, so we split it 4 ways. 1/4 went to Barnes United Methodist Church for their food pantry, in fact, but another quarter went to a ministry, an organization that was working around domestic violence prevention. And, domestic violence has been on the rise during the COVID season, so we thought this was a way to tangibly help, and so we were invited to this. And the invitation came to Heather Hilbert, who's the chair of our missions committee, and to myself to attend this banquet. And I didn't know what to expect, but the picture I had in my head, I knew it was being organized out of the mayor's office. And so I was expecting the mayor and city officials to be there, and for community organizers and developers to be there, and for there to be pastors. And yes, I expected there to be a handful of people who are kind of representing the cause. But I thought it was going to be more of like a networking event, That's just the picture I had in my head. I got there, and I walked into the gym where this banquet was being held. And the first thing I noticed is that I was the only male in the entire room. Probably 100 or so women and me. And the great majority of these women had all been survivors of domestic abuse. And they had this amazing program. They had a singer who blew the roof off. They had a motivational speaker who spoke courage and strength into those women. Different women stood up at different times and shared some of their testimony, what they lived through, and they thanked the organization for the ways in which they kind of helped get them out of terrible situations. And then at one point they called me and Heather to come forward. And they presented us with a plaque, a Survivor Champion Award recognizing Zionsville United Methodist Church and Heather Hilbert for their support, encouragement, and advocacy. And I felt so humbled. I had no words to say. I let Heather do the talking for us. To look in that room and know what all those women had gone through and the courage and strength it took for them to change their lives, it was so incredibly powerful, and I wished every single person from our church could have been in that room. And then they called each woman up by name, and every single woman received a certificate of perseverance and a bouquet of flowers. And then they received a gift basket full of blankets, journals, other gift cards, and I thought to myself, next year we're going to do something. As a church, we're going to put something in every one of those gift baskets so that we can encourage those women and tell them that we're behind them. It was just such a powerful, powerful experience. And then the next day I came here and preached. And I hadn't processed it all. I hadn't put it all together. But I stood up that morning and I said, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. And when I thought about all flesh, I thought about a room full of women who are all overcoming domestic violence. And I thought about a milk crate full of names of people who are receiving needed assistance. And I thought of a singular person who prayed to receive Christ and was baptized one day. And I thought of a Syrian family who fled their home and for 5 years bounced around and is now making their home just up the road in Lebanon. And I thought, all flesh indeed. It's not just that we serve the least of these because it feels good. We do it because it's right. It's because who God calls us to be, who God calls the church to be. And when we serve the least of these, We're fulfilling his mission to pour out Spirit on all flesh. We are doing it as if we are serving the King himself. So let me take you back now to that hot August day in Haiti. Sun beaming down, fumes getting me high, that. And I'm wrestling with the question, should I keep painting with great care and detail each one of these chairs? What I didn't tell you is when we moved down to Haiti, Jamel and I took a whole suitcase full of books because we knew there wasn't Netflix or what didn't even exist then, but we knew there wasn't television and stuff. So we brought books, and the book I just read that week was Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger. If you've never read Franny and Zoe, it's a lot like Catcher in the Rye. There's two siblings, one of whom's having a nervous breakdown, and they're helping each other through it. Anyways, I won't tell you the whole story, but the last line, Zoe, the brother, is talking to his sister Franny, and kind of the last line it leaves you with is he's saying to her, buddy, it's Christ himself. Every person you meet, every person you see, Christ himself, buddy. And so I looked at that chair that was in front of me, and I didn't know who was going to be sitting in it. But whoever that child was going to be, I knew they were Christ himself. And I didn't really know a whole lot about this young man who was painting beside us, of whose work I was so critical, but I knew one thing. That was Christ himself too. And every person you meet as you go through the week, the person sitting next to you right now, the videos we'll see from World Vision, and every child we meet in this journey, you know who they are? They're Christ himself, buddy. Christ himself. And Jesus says, whenever you serve the least of these, you do it for me. And that doesn't mean that we always know what to do, or that people won't take advantage of our kindness. What it does mean is that we are called not just to see other people's needs, but to see Christ in them. And as we love and serve them, it's Christ himself we're serving.